All roads lead to Rome. This is only half the story. If all roads lead to Rome, then all doors lead to Rema. Be wary, gentle traveler. An unlocked door is far more dangerous than an unlit street at night. An Outsider's Primer on Riemann History, Marcus Ashtar. Andrea sat, tracing her fingertip along the rim of her glass. The egg timer dinged once. She faked a smile. Her companion, his 15 minutes now expired, stood and left. She watched the tea light on the cocktail table sputter within its pool of melted wax. The autumn room at the Marriott had a lovely spread. The bar, the hors d'oeuvres, and the low music. It made Andrea uncomfortable, like she was poaching on somebody else's hunting grounds. She did her best to feign interest at the steady succession of single men, as it was the only chance she had to confront the man who took her sister. First was the guy with enormous biceps, who was enthusiastic yet sleazy about his vocation in massage therapy. Then there was the balding middle school English teacher who, while pleasant and friendly, was clearly lying about his age and marital status. Following him was the sweaty fellow who was far too well-groomed and far too poorly spoken. Andrea reset the timer, smoothed the corners of her name tag sticker onto her blouse, and waited. The next gentleman sported a green sweater vest and a hairpiece. They exchanged their introductions and brief pleasantries. He was a talker, much to Andrea's relief. She kept him prattling with a polite smile and small verbal acknowledgments. All the while she stole careful glances at the table to her left. The next one over was the man she was waiting for. Though it wasn't saying very much, he was by far the most handsome one in the group. He had short, dark, and curly hair, a clean-shaven jawline, and brown eyes. He wore a black dress suit with a jacket and tie. His name tag was marked with a single letter. Y. The other women may have thought he was being cute or mysterious. Andrea knew that actually was his full name. She kept the talker rolling with a generous chuckle at his weak pun. She sipped the burbling dregs on the bottom of her glass, keeping the corner of her eye trained on her quarry. Y was smooth, she had to hand it to him. She saw it happen when he slipped in for the kill. It was a casual motion, leaning in with one hand to gesture the punchline of his joke, while with the other he stole his companion's pen. The flex of Y's power as he took it, with so much more attached, almost went unnoticed if Andrea hadn't been watching for it. "That's such a lovely shade. I've really got a thing for redheads," the talker leered. Then he touched her hand. Andrea's stomach turned. She responded with a smile as sharp as a razor's edge. She willed her own skin to turn as cold as ice. The talker withdrew. A sudden headache set stabbing in his eyes. The timer dinged. The talker left. Andrea's chance finally came. "Hey, Y!" She grinned at him. She saw in his face the crack in his mask, the sudden panic at seeing her here. He quickly recovered and approached with his smile and quiet confidence. "Haven't done one of these speed dating things before. They're kind of fun," she lied. "I do. All the time," he said. "I did personals for a time before that. The whole acronym racket, you know. NS, ND, SWM, looking for somebody to share fond memories with." He twirled the stolen pen over his fingertips and pocketed it. "That's a good one," Andrea chuckled. "At least they know what you're really after." There was camaraderie between them, a kinship of secrets they shared from the power they held, masked from the oblivious people in the room. Y stood behind his chair, hands tensed. "It's all right. I'm not here for a fight," she said. "Just two wolves among sheep." "You're the wolf," replied Y. "They call you Lupa for a reason." The friendship they may have had was overshadowed by an unwelcome guest. As Y sat down, several years of bloody history took a hefty space at the table between them. "It's pretty easy pickings up here. I'm sure the fellows are smitten by you." "I'm just here for you," she said. "I knew this was one of your haunts." Y prickled. "It's okay," she soothed. "This is your business. I don't care so long as you're not hurting anybody." "No," Y replied firmly. "I don't hurt anyone. I only take the little pieces, small memories. Trinkets. I never take anything they would ever miss. Andrea suspected he was trying to convince himself as much as her. I saw, she said. You're really good. I trained and practiced since I was a child. Your execution was very subtle, especially for someone who learned it by... She paused. Appropriation? Y offered. Andrea nodded. It was a far more diplomatic word. Well, thank you, he accepted. Andrea licked her lips, considering how best to broach the topic. The timer ticked. What do you want? Y beat her to it. His question was unfriendly, but there was no malice in it either. I want my little sister back. I can't help you. Of course you can. You took her. I filled a role, nothing more. Y touched at his belt. Something metal clinked beneath his jacket as he shifted. I have a duty, so I answered a call. Andrea scoffed. I know you don't recognize my responsibilities, said Y. I don't really expect you to. What are you doing up here then? She brushed a hand to acknowledge the room. Don't try to sell me that sanctimonious keyworder shit. Everybody knows you spend your time up here indulging your little habit. Y stood up from the table. He looked as if he'd lost his appetite and thought it best to leave before he lost his temper as well. Andrea gathered up her things and settled her weapon in its place on the loop at her back. She followed Y out of the autumn room and past the reception desk in the foyer. Instead of heading out to the traffic loop, he led her directly to the utility closet. A sign on the door plainly read, Employees Only. Delilah was just a kid. You didn't think to just come to me? She pressed. It wasn't my idea in the first place. I was summoned, he replied. Genevieve formed the quorum to arrest Delilah. She's a lupa, same as you. You can take this up with her. Y reached beneath his jacket to the small of his back and produced a wide metal ring, clattering with keys. To call that aggregate of steel a key ring was a gross understatement. Y held in his hand a thick hoop, wide enough to fit around a person's neck, which was laden with hundreds of keys, mixed among dozens of smaller rings, each bearing more keys of their own. The assortment of sizes and shapes and types of keys was a collection that janitors would covet in their deepest of dreams. My mother is taking this up with Genevieve. Livia, ugh, Y shuddered. As the lock rolled open, Andrea heard a sound so deep the echo resonated across the ground and touched her chest with a buzz. Would you rather have it the other way around? I'm trying to keep this civil. I did you a favor by insisting to be the one to speak with you. Meet me halfway here. Y opened the door and they stepped through. The aroma of mothballs wafted from below. The only light was from a single bulb hanging from a wire at the base of the stairs, clearly not in the basement stairwell of a hotel. Instead of papered drywall, the walls were slats of finished wood, and a pair of handrails guided them down the steep descent. A red carpet flowed beneath their feet like a long and stubbly tongue. Dre, listen, said Y, stepping down the creaking stairs. His voice grew louder now that he was away from the public. Delilah killed a child. She drowned a boy half her age. She did no such thing. I know my little sister. You know that she's different. There's something strange about her, even by our standards. Her talents developed early. She sees things, yes, Andrea countered, but she's not violent. There were witnesses, said Y, reaching the base of the stairs. Did you see it? Of course not, and if I did, I would have done more than just arrest her, he said. Andrea met him at the landing door. Look, said Y, softening. This wasn't personal, and this wasn't some witch hunt. You know me. You know I wouldn't sign up for anything like that. He opened the exit with another key and walked through. Andrea entered a long hallway. The corridor had once been something like a mining tunnel. The halls on each side did not run straight, but wriggled unevenly before sloping away, bending upwards in one direction and downward in the other. The walls were populated by hundreds of doors, standing at attention on either side of her like an endless crooked line of soldiers. Each door was unique, different from its neighbors. There were the myriad wooden doors of the domestic kind one would expect to find from houses, offices, and apartments. Spattered among them were steel gates, sliding glass panes, plastic paneling, and iron bars. Andrea spotted a shoji, a grid of Japanese paper, right beside a steel vault that by all rights belonged on a submarine. We're in the southwest arm of the web, about 3 turns down. Y pointed down the slope, hinting that they should go their separate ways. Bingabine's up there. I'm sure you can find a way home from here. Y turned away. Though it came off rude, Andrea recognized it as a polite gesture. Her collection was nowhere near as extensive as his own. Y sifted through the jingling loop. I'm not leaving until you help me, she followed him. Who has the key? You know I can't tell you, he muttered. You can. Give that much at least. They approached an entry that could have once been the front door of a colonial house. Y produced an iron key from his ponderous ring. Its black head was the size of a golf ball, inlaid with a swirl of silver. The blade ended in a set of broad, square-cut teeth. Y placed it into the slot below the knob and turned. I'm heading to Aventine right now. I could take you in to check on her. Do you really want to follow me there? He asked over his shoulder. The hair on her arms stood on end. Y was calling her bluff. She knew that if she followed him, she'd be stepping off of neutral grounds and into hostile territory. She didn't have time to decide. When Y opened the door, Andrea shrieked. Y stumbled back and reached to the small of his back. The pair of them were greeted at the door by a pair of wide, round eyes looking up at them with fierce disapproval. Wait, said Y, his voice edged with alarm. It's okay. He withdrew his hand from under his coat and nervously straightened his tie. Then he planted his fists on his hips. Sitting on the ground before them, waiting like an angry guest on the doorstep, was a fat orange owl. Hoot, the creature said, not in the way an owl does, but the way a person does, with a breathy H and a hard T. Shit, replied Y. What are you doing here, Hoots? Hoot, replied Hoots. The round eyes widened, an expression portraying urgency. I'm busy, Y grunted. Tell him no, absolutely not. Not tonight, you understand? Hoot, Hoots said again, curtly. This seemed to settle the issue. Fine, Y sniffed. You go ahead then. Tell him I'll be in shortly. The owl swiveled his head and looked up toward Andrea, its avian eyes speckled with the colors of autumn leaves. She swallowed, her heart still pounding in her chest from the surprise of discovering him. Hoots was the size of a beach ball and as dense as an anvil. His plumage was a violent orange, striped with blonde, as if he had somehow swallowed a tabby cat and thereby acquired some of the feline's coloring. Above the curved beak and baseball-sized eyes ran a swath of red plumage like a prominent unibrow, which curled around Hoots's eyelids and lent to his stern expressions. Protruding from the owl's head was a pair of bony ram horns that had no earthly business belonging to a bird. Hoots looked back to Y and flapped once sarcastically. The wings were pitiful things. Like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, Hoots' stunted limbs folded against his oversized trunk. It was quite obvious the owl couldn't fly any better than a pumpkin could. What's he doing here? Andrea asked. Same thing as you, ruining my night off, said Y. What does he want? Kel needs to speak with me. When your former instructor needs to see you, he sends his familiar to hunt you down? Yeah, it's pretty weird, Y agreed. He is a little too fat to be a carrier pigeon. Hoot, said Hoots, glowering. How did he even get here? She asked. Beats me. Y knelt and offered his forearm to Hoots. The owl waddled up, grasping a pair of black talons over Y's elbow. With an audible grunt, Y balanced the bird on the crook of his arm. Then he stood. I have to go, Y mumbled. I'm not leaving. My little sister is in prison, Andrea replied. There's nothing I can do. She's safe, I promise. The hearing will be in a few days. I don't have that kind of time, Andrea huffed. I'll come with you to Kel's. We can talk about this. This time it was her turn to press his resolve. She could imagine the embarrassment it would create for Y to explain everything to the old man. All right, fine, Y grumbled, forced to concede. Come see me later at my house. I'll arrange a formal visit. Delilah was too erratic and frightened to speak to anyone when we brought her in. Perhaps if you're there, she can explain her side of the story. If I feel convinced that she didn't do it, that she's not dangerous, I will withdraw my support. If I walk out, the quorum dissolves and she should be free to go. That's not good enough. The longer this takes, the more my mother... Bring her along then, said Y. I know she's not afraid of the tower. Just promise me she won't try to burn it down." Y left Andrea standing in the web, surrounded by thousands of doors and running out of options.